It's been a great season so far.
Man.
Here at the Proving Grounds, we've talked to a lot of buddies that have a good season.
What a deer.
And still many more that still have a tag in their pocket. So today, I want to talk about some late season hunting strategies. Some states, especially those in the Midwest, although I'm thinking South Carolina and a few others, season ends at December 31st, January 1st. And others, like Missouri, are open until January 15th, or places down south even open into February. So I want to talk about late season strategies. And one of the biggest things to know about late season strategies is food is the #1 resource deer are looking for at that time of year. Unless there is a huge acorn crop throughout much of the Midwest, acorns will be either consumed or rotted by this time of the late season. Now, red oaks have a higher content of tannic acid, a mild acid, and that's a preservative. And if there's a huge red oak crop, I've seen those last all the way to turkey season. White oaks are certainly gone by then. So depending on where you are, you may be looking at other food sources like native browse, food plots, or standing crops, or spilled grain from where they've harvested crops. All those are good food sources, again, depending on where you are and the conditions. I like to have, above and beyond that, food sources that haven't had a lot of hunting pressure, especially in the last week or two. By this time of year, deer are pretty wise. They've been chased around the woods a lot by hunters, coyotes, everything else. And they're not just walking out in daylight to areas that's been hunted every day, worn a UTV trail to the blind, getting in there. They know the gig is up, and they're gonna come after legal shooting hours. So we want to find food sources that deer do not associate with danger. We have several hidey-hole food plots here at the Proving Grounds, and because of the way Missouri's rifle season is, that plus we've purposely not hunted a couple of them, we're gonna have some great spots for that late season hunting. And I suggest you consider the same. You may have a food source that you back off hunting a month before the late season. That seems silly. Gosh, I put all this work and effort and planted my seed blend in there not to hunt it. Well, you're just saving that like an ace reliever. You're just saving that for a great place to hunt during the late season, because if deer have food they don't associate with danger, that's a magnet during this time of year. Having a food source is not just enough. You want to know about when to hunt. Oftentimes it's easier to hunt afternoons. You're not moving when deer are moving. You're not alerting deer getting in there. But there's always some exceptions in the whitetail world, and on a really cold morning, what I define as really cold is at least 10% colder than normal. So you can go online, find, if you're normal for easy math, is 20 degrees in the morning and it's 18 or 15 or 10. Deer tend to move later based on my observations and those of many others. They move later. So you can get in there right at daylight without much fear that deer are going to be moving when you're moving. And the reason's pretty obvious. Deer have real thin hair under their, leg pits, if you will. You've seen that when you've been eviscerating or gutting a deer. And that's a thermal heat vent. When they're open, they're losing a lot of heat, so they can lay all curled up and conserve heat. So really cold mornings is one of my favorite times to hunt for a couple reasons. Deer tend to move a little bit later, and when it's really cold, you know which way the thermals are going. They're going downhill, down to the creek, down the valley somewhere. If you're cold and then warm, those thermals are gonna churn, and we know that thermals can be worse than wind direction. They're just spreading that scent everywhere. So really cold morning is gonna stay cold for a while, and your scent's going one direction, and the deer are moving a bit later. That's a recipe to tag a good buck.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Soil Pro Outdoors, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
Another thing that's happening at that time of year, if you're hunting in an area that has good habitat, good groceries, and your female fawns are 65, 70 pounds or more, depending on where you are by that time of year, these are fawns that were born that spring, they're going to become receptive. They will reach puberty at that time. And female fawns have been on a food cover pattern. they don't have enough experience to really understand all the dangers of the hunting season, and they can drag those mature bucks right out into the open during daylight hours. We've had some really good hunts based on that, going to an area where maybe our moultrie mobiles are showing several fawns, maybe we can see close enough to our female fawns to a food plot in the afternoon, and we're just camping there knowing that one of them's going to become receptive and bring that buck right to the food plot. This is different than a mature doe because, as I've shared in the past, mature does tend to separate from fawns and go off to a real brushy area when they're becoming receptive. Otherwise, they know they're going to be pestered by multiple bucks. It can actually be dangerous for the doe. Female fawns don't know that. They haven't had that experience yet, and they tend to go food cover every day. And those old bucks been through a long hunting season, so they're moving around at dark, but when that receptive younger doe's out there in the plot, he's coming right out. This is a huge technique that's often overlooked by several hunters. I'll add one more to that. If you've had a pretty aggressive doe harvest on your property, you've met your doe harvest quota, that's going to mean there's probably some female fawns without a doe out there, and they tend to group up, and if you're seeing groups of fawns coming to a plot, that is a great place to find a mature buck. The opposite can be true. Let's say it's been wicked cold, way colder than normal. That first warm day is almost always a feeding frenzy. I love that first warm day, not just for me, although that's good, but the deer just seem to be moving freely and they're just head down eating. They're regaining calories they did not consume during that really cold weather. And I'm not just talking, 2 degrees below normal. I'm talking way colder than normal, and all of a sudden, you get that big thaw. It's 30 or 40 degrees, or that's relative depending on where you are, up north, down south. These are relative numbers. Man, deer tend to really feed aggressively that first day when it starts warming up. You can't be 3 days later. It's that first day, that first morning, that first afternoon when it starts warming up after an extended cold spell. Cover is a big factor, but cover can be different. If it's really cold, you're up north. I like cover on a south-facing slope, obviously. Cover is not big, tall, because they want to be in the sun. We talk a lot about conifers and cover, and that has a different role, but when the sun's shining, they want to get where the wind's not hitting them, and the sun's radiant energy can warm them up, almost like sitting in the car in the winter with the windows up. If they're in tall, thick grass or tall, dead vegetation, that's shearing the wind off above, because when a deer's laying on the ground, it's not sticking up very far at all. And that thick vegetation will shear the wind up over them, almost like, again, they're sitting in a glass window, and that sun's coming down. I've done it to warm up during the hunt, and I see a lot of deer doing it when I'm looking through my Burris optics. Sometimes food plots have been consumed pretty low if you don't have enough groceries for the number of deer on your property, and deer can really be consuming a lot of native vegetation. If there's been a recent clear cut or you did a burn the previous year, there's all kinds of ways that sets back vegetation. Let it grow through that growing season. A lot of that's still going to be standing come to late season, and that can be another magnet for deer. We talk a lot in the preseason about that food cover pattern. We like to make our little hidey-ho food plots in the morning about 75 yards away so they get there before dark, or they're coming through in daylight as they're going to bed, right? They've been all night, and you may get a few minutes of daylight as they're heading in. Well, that same thing can be true during the late season. They're moving strictly pretty much food cover unless they find a receptive doe somewhere. So the closer you can be to cover, the better your odds of seeing a mature buck or even does at that point of view. And if your property doesn't have that, now's a good time to be assessing the property, taking an evaluation of everything, because the leaves are off, you can see more. Get out and walk around, either now or after hunting season's over, and figure out what you need to do to make your property better. I often say I want to have the Hampton Inn and the Waffle House on the property where I hunt. I want cover and food, and I want them arranged in a certain way. We're going to be assisting several landowners as soon as hunting season's over, and we'll share some of those consulting trips with you and hopefully share some tips you can apply where you hunt. I really enjoy hunting during the late season. There's usually less hunters in the timber. There's some negatives, like a lot of deer have been harvested or killed from an injury from fighting or something, but there's a lot less hunting pressure typically at that time of year. And the woods look different. The leaves are off the hardwoods. You can see farther. You can see deer moving farther. There's kind of quietness to hunting the late season, and I really enjoy that. Even more important than the quietness of a cold, still day during the late season is taking quiet time every day to intentionally seek the Creator's will and applying it to our lives. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.